Come on, bitch, let's go. Come on, get ready, bitches. You haven't seen nothing yet. Come on.
Valentino, Versace, Lamborghini, Bugatti. I got money to burn. I'm single and I'm naughty.
Come on.
Tiffany's, Cartier, Gucci, Armani.
Come on.
Break out your black card, boys. It's time to party.
Hi, you guys. So we're going to get right into it today because there's a lot to cover. First and foremost, I wanted to explain to some of the people that listened to the beginning of this show on free platforms and were a little bit confused because they thought some of the sound bites I played in the first 45 minutes of the show last week were from the 2023 Lost Maria Farmer interview, and they weren't. Okay, so what the people in the free part didn't know was that as soon as it goes into the Patreon, it actually plays, a 2-hour interview with Maria Farmer with me interjecting, verifying what she's saying, and telling you additional information to put in context some of the more secret, less known stuff Maria Farmer's talking about so you guys can understand it and realize some of the bombs she's dropping, because if you don't know Epstein deeply, you won't understand them or you won't believe them because you'll be like, that's unbelievable. And so I spent a lot of time as I went through that 2-hour interview with the paid people last week to break it down as to what she's talking about. When she brings up the Iranian embassy and being kidnapped at Les Wexner's house in Ohio and ties to the CIA that she feels could be involved with some of the Epstein employees and all these things that to people who don't know the depth of what she's talking about will be like, what the hell is she even saying? Okay. So I spent a lot of time on that. All right. And the first 45 minutes of last week's show, of course, was me giving the origin story of this Lost interview and how I got it and sort of the crazy irony of the way the interview went down and who got the interview. And we're not going to talk about that. You want to get that, go listen to last week's show. But there were some unanswered things that Maria Farmer said in this Lost interview that I couldn't find. And what I love is I have some attorneys in the Patreon that listen to the shows, and they, along with some other patrons, dug for me on some things and alerted me to some threads that had some proof, which then I could use to see if it was bullshit, like somebody made it, or was it real, because out there now you kind of have to do that, right? Because there's a lot of people who seem to be very reliable in what they're covering, but they aren't. So bringing it full circle, I was sent a bunch of data I couldn't find. So I was like, yay, now I'm going to be able to talk about that this week and confirm that what Maria Farmer said about this particular thing was real and true. Okay, so let me give you a quick update on Ghislaine Maxwell's legal because it's very confusing. She was subpoenaed by the House Oversight Committee to, under oath, be interviewed by them and answer questions. Maxwell responded with that she couldn't do this unless she was given clemency. Simultaneously, she has petitioned the Supreme Court to go for an appeal. The Supreme Court has not responded to this, but the prosecutors have argued that she shouldn't get it. Meanwhile, the House Oversight Committee informally responded to Ghislaine's attorneys about her getting clemency and said they would not be giving that clemency over because most Republicans don't want to have a sex trafficker of kids get a clemency. And so then Ghislaine's legal team went to Trump and said, can we get a pardon? And then we'll be happy to move forward and tell you everything. Trump said, I haven't reviewed any request for a pardon from Ghislaine, but he acknowledged he had the power to give it if he so desired. And also, I want to note here that some woman said she was related to Epstein and did like a tell-all interview that was pretty out there. Her name is Anya Wick, but I just want you guys to know that Anya Wick has said she's related to a bunch of famous people. Let me list them for you. Jeffrey Epstein, she claimed to be his niece. Shia LaBeouf, she claimed to be his twin sister. Walt Disney, she claimed Walt Disney was her great-grandfather. So I'll just leave that with you to consider, okay? But I don't believe this lady. Okay, so let me give you a quick update on Ghislaine Maxwell's legal because it's very confusing. She was subpoenaed by the House Oversight Committee to, under oath, be interviewed by them and answer questions. Maxwell responded with that she couldn't do this unless she was given clemency. Simultaneously, she has petitioned the Supreme Court to go for an appeal. The Supreme Court has not responded to this, but the prosecutors have argued that she shouldn't get it. Meanwhile, the House Oversight Committee informally responded to Ghislaine's attorneys about her getting clemency and said they would not be giving that clemency over because most Republicans don't want to have a sex trafficker of kids get a clemency. And so then Ghislaine's legal team went to Trump and said, can we get a pardon? And then we'll be happy to move forward and tell you everything. Trump said, I haven't reviewed any requests for a pardon from Ghislaine, but he acknowledged he had the power to give it if he so desired. And also, I want to note here that some woman said she was related to Epstein and did like a tell-all interview that was pretty out there. Her name is Anya Wick, but I just want you guys to know that Anya Wick has said she's related to a bunch of famous people. Let me list them for you. Jeffrey Epstein, she claimed to be his niece. Shia LaBeouf, she claimed to be his twin sister. Walt Disney, she claimed Walt Disney was her great-grandfather. So I'll just leave that with you to consider, okay? But I don't believe this lady. Also, it turns out right after we see Ghislaine Maxwell interviewed by the Justice Department and she has this mysterious box, she heads back into her prison and boom, over the last few days, she's kind of secretly moved to Fort Worth, Texas. And now she's in the same low-security federal prison that Elizabeth Holmes is currently serving her 10-year sentence, along with Real Housewives of Salt Lake City, Jen Shah, by the way. Now, we would be completely naive to not think that there's some sort of deal in place that's happening. And part of it was her moving to this low-security prison, which has several benefits if you do a really good job, at the prison. It can manifest in getting out significantly early. It can manifest in even leaving the prison in some cases and returning, community service and things like that. There's a lot more they have to work with in terms of leniency, let's just say. So it does look like some sort of deal is at work. Okay, now who's running this deal? Is it the Justice Department? Is it the administration? Is it, elites that we don't know who the hell they are, but they're more powerful than anybody known to man? I have no idea who's pulling the strings on this, but it's definitely going down something. Now, just when you think you've heard it all, a security camera footage that the Justice Department ops, somebody going through it at TMZ notices that in the corner there is a shadow of an orange figure walking down Epstein's wing of the prison at 10:39 p.m. the night of his death. When you watch the video, I will put it in the Patreon, you can clearly see this orange blob that appears to be moving up the screen, but all that really is a person walking down his hallway, an inmate, orange on. It's pretty obvious. So who was this person at 10:39 the night of Epstein's death walking down the hallway. Question, and there's been lots of analysis done on this video, in the last 24 hours. So without getting too deep into this part of things, the reason that Ghislaine has a really good chance is that quite a few of the victims, based on Maria Farmer's interview, were also recruiters similar to Ghislaine Maxwell, and some of them were paid out millions of dollars for being victims, but there were several victims and people around at the time that believed those women were doing the same thing Ghislaine was doing. So why did, they throw the book at her and not everyone else? And Ghislaine's, argument at the Supreme Court level is, hey, wait a minute, Epstein signed a plea deal that turned out to be illegal, by the way, which is so crazy because they didn't show the victims the plea deal, which they're supposed to do. So it was very secretive, the plea deal. Ghislaine is saying, listen, he signed a plea deal that had a clause that said they couldn't come after anybody he was working with in his crimes, and yet you guys still came after me. So, and let's not forget what Acosta said, who did that plea deal. Alexander Acosta, who was the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of Florida in 2008 when this deal was done, supposedly said, this was what the Daily Beast wrote, journalist Vicki Ward, she said that he told the Trump administration that he was asked to cut a deal with Epstein because he was told the financier belonged to intelligence and that the issue was above his pay grade. The financier belonged to intelligence. Take that in for a minute and then couple that with the fact that they don't share the plea deal with the victims, which is unheard of in this situation and illegal. So what do you think about that? Now, I dropped a bomb in my last show, a speculative bomb, and that was that I believe that Jeffrey Epstein died for Les Wexner. And I build that case as we listen to what Maria Farmer says about Les Wexner. So you'll have to see, that in last week's show. But I just want to remind you that I said that. Now let's get into some of the things that I was sent after last week's show. First and foremost, Maria Farmer said she couldn't understand how attorney Bobbi Sternheim could be representing both Ghislaine Maxwell and Nicholas Tartaglione, if you want to be formal, but he goes by Nick. So do you guys know who Nick is? Nick is the ex-cop who was in prison for murder, which he says he was framed and didn't do. Nick was Epstein's cellmate when he first allegedly tries to commit suicide. Epstein tells his lawyer that Nick actually tried to kill him and put a rope around his neck as a bizarre prank. But it was Nick who assaulted him in prison, and it wasn't that he was trying to commit suicide. But Nick, from prison, did an interview where he said that that was a lie, that Epstein wanted to die. Epstein asked him to help him commit suicide, and it was Nick who actually stopped him from pulling it off the first time he tried, that he intervened. And Nick believes that Epstein made up the story to get Nick out of his cell so that A, he'd be taken off suicide watch, and B, that Nick would be removed from his cell environment and he'd be left alone so he could then do it. Originally, Epstein was on suicide watch, but they removed him because he met with the psychologist, and I guess he convinced them that he didn't need to be anymore. So that's at the time that he actually pulls it off. He's not on suicide watch. Anyway, I'm not going to go down the rabbit hole of the night of Epstein's death because we've done that a few times, as deep as you possibly can go, as you guys know. And make no mistake, full disclosure, I think Epstein was murdered, especially given the missing footage on the tape. But anyway, back to Maria Farmer. She thinks it's very unusual that Bobbi Sternheim is an attorney for Nicholas and Ghislaine, and she doesn't understand why this is, not a conflict of interest for Sternheim. Well, I can answer some of this, and I did want to tell you what is weird about this and what isn't. Okay, so people get really excited about this aspect of things because it kind of shows there's something higher going on, like Costa alluded to. However, here's the nuance. Bobbi Sternheim starts representing Nicholas Tartaglione on August 2019, out of White Plains, New York, as Curcio counsel, appointed pursuant to the Criminal Justice Act, meaning she is not retained by Nicholas. She's appointed by the court to Nicholas. With Ghislaine, she starts representing her in October of 2020. So this is like a total year later. And to be fair, Ghislaine has retained her. She hasn't been appointed to Ghislaine. She's been retained by Ghislaine, meaning she's paying her. So in that instance, it doesn't feel like a conflict because there were two different times that these, representations were happening. And I need to note that Tartaglione's criminal case has zero to do with Epstein. He murdered 4 people, totally separate to that. And Ghislaine is a sex trafficker, in a totally different case. The only thing that ties them together is Epstein's mysterious death attempts and death itself. But there is something else that's unusual about Bobbi, and that is that she holds top secret SCI clearance. Now, how do we know this? Because it's actually stated across some of her platforms where she promotes herself. Now, why is this unusual? Well, it is kind of weird, right? That the court appointed this woman who specializes in security clearance criminal cases with terrorism, organized crime, and matters of national security interest. That's her sweet spot. It's kind of weird, right, that she's working for Ghislaine, paid, and appointed to Nick, isn't it? Kind of overkill, right, for Nick? Now, there's also something very unusual, which is she suddenly gets appointed to Nick's case only 10 days after Epstein is found dead in his cell. Now, some of her higher profile cases were a 1998 U.S. embassy bombing in Kenya and Tanzania. She actually defended Khalid Fawaz, who was connected to Al-Qaeda. She also represented Min Kwang Pham, who ran Al-Qaeda operations out of Yemen. She got him to plead guilty to planning attacks. So this lady is like a super lawyer, but this, her sweet spot doesn't seem to be sex trafficking or, a quadruple homicide that happened back in 2016 and, it centers around cocaine distribution. It's kind of like, what's she doing on his case? I don't know. You guys can see how you feel about that. Now, here's something really important for you to know. She does not represent either Ghislaine or Tartaglione anymore. She came off both of their cases at the end of their criminal trials. And actually, she's helping Diddy, we're not sure in his criminal or civil case, but she is somehow helping Diddy in his cases. So that is where she's at. So maybe she's moving from Al-Qaeda defenses to sex trafficking? God, what a depressing career in law. All right, let's move on to some of the things that happened. Trump said this, and I'm not going to comment on it. I'm just going to play it to you, and then we're going to move on to what came out about Bill Gates. Holy moly.
Can you settle that? What was it about? What caused the breach?
That's such old history. Very easy to explain. But I don't want to waste your time by explaining it. But for years, I wouldn't talk to Jeffrey Epstein. I wouldn't talk because he did something that was inappropriate. He hired help. And I said, don't ever do that again. He stole people that worked for me. I said, don't ever do that again. He did it again. And I threw him out of the place, persona non grata. I threw him out, and that was it. I'm glad I did, if you want to know the truth.
So that's the first one. Then he gets into more detail with a different reporter. Let me play that one for you.
Mr. President, you said yesterday your falling out with Jeffrey Epstein was over him taking some of the workers from your business. But your administration in the past said that you threw him out because he was a creep. So can you explain that discrepancy?
Well, maybe they're the same thing, sort of a little bit of the same thing. But no, he took people that worked for me, and I told him don't do it anymore, and he did it. And I said, stay the hell out of here.
Were some of the workers that were taken from you, were some of them young women?
Were some of them
young women?
Well, I don't want to say, but everyone knows the people that were taken. And it was the concept of taking people that work for me is bad. But that story's been pretty well out there. And the answer is yes, they were.
Yes, they were.
Yeah.
What did they do?
In the spa.
Jobs.
In the spa.
Yeah, it's people that work in the spa. I have a great spa, one of the best spas in the world.
Mr. President, did one of those stolen, persons, that include Virginia Giuffre?
I don't know. I think she worked at the spa. I think so. I think that was one of the people. Yeah. He stole her. And by the way, she had no complaints about us, as you know. None whatsoever.
Another odd connection that people like to talk about, but Maria Farmer didn't bring this particular thing up, but I have been seeing people discuss this one, is that Bill Gates, former science advisor, was the backup executor in Jeffrey Epstein's will. And why should this interest you? And why is this juicy? Because people think that Epstein was sending an FU to Bill Gates by appointing this man 2 days before he kills himself, and I'm going to tell you why. His name is Boris Nikolic, and his background is he was a biotech venture capitalist and immunologist. He worked for Bill Gates from 2007 to 2014, and he also was involved in the starting of the Gates Foundation in 2007. Now, he initially was consulting for the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, but then he was moved to Bill Gates' company BGC3 LLC, which is a research company that Bill Gates founded in 2008. It supposedly does scientific and technological services, industrial analysis research, design and development of computer hardware and software to combat poverty. And it's a think tank model for health and global development and technology investment. This is the third company that Gates started in this kind of realm. The other one is Cascade Investment. It really is a vehicle for Bill Gates to pursue his scientific and technical research interests. And they do climate change, clean energy, and Alzheimer's disease research as some of the things they're into. Now, Boris worked at Harvard, and he was part of a circle of scientists who Epstein worked with and backed, because as I've mentioned in previous shows, Epstein loved to back scientific endeavors. In fact, he famously did a conference that was dedicated to anti-gravity in 2006 for Cambridge. And Stephen Hawking was the anchor scientist at this particular conference. And they did go to Epstein's Island, and they did submarine excursions and other, I guess, science-oriented things, although they look like they had a great time. Let's just put it that way. There were 21 scientists, I believe, on that conference of the greatest minds that all were friends with Hawking. And it was like a big scientific think tank. Not a lot is known about the agenda of what they were doing. All that is known is that it was organized by the Center for Theoretical Cosmology, CTC, at the University of Cambridge. This was Stephen Hawking's baby, and it was under the Department of Applied Mathematics and Theoretical Physics at Cambridge. They were mostly interested in Big Bang theories, black holes, gravitational waves, and cosmic microwave CMB studies. They did theoretical math, but, it had to be provable. They didn't want theoretical models that couldn't be proven by math. Anyway, Epstein's the sponsor of this particular conference, but it wasn't really widely promoted in any way, so it's kind of mysterious if you're into this sort of thing. Now, I bring this up because Epstein's backup executor of his will is this Boris guy, and a lot of people think it was a secret message that Epstein put out, a kind of fuck you to Bill Gates, by putting him on as the backup executor of his will, because it called out and exposed that there were bigger ties between Epstein and Bill Gates than anyone could imagine. Or maybe they had some things in common. When Boris found out that he was one of the three executors, he was shocked because, of course, the press all picked up on it. And Epstein notably did this 2 days before he kills himself. So he intended for it to be, big news. He knew that the news outlets would be covering who was going to be executing his will under the circumstances. And so putting Boris's name on there and then finding out later that Boris allegedly hadn't spoken to him in years, it's obviously some sort of way of getting everybody to look at Boris where we otherwise wouldn't, right? Epstein was like, hey, look over here. And Boris actually admitted that he believed it was a retaliatory move too in the press. Here's the quote. Over the past few years, we have all learned that Epstein was a master deceiver. I now see that his philanthropic proposals were designed to ingratiate himself with my colleagues and me in an attempt to further his own social and financial ambitions. When he failed to achieve his goals, he started to retaliate. Bill Gates definitely flew at least on the Lolita Express once from New Jersey to Palm Beach, but unlike the scientists that I mentioned earlier, there was no proof that he actually went to the island that Virginia Giuffre covers in her manuscript that never gets released, called The Billionaire's Playboy Club. Now, funny enough, there's 3 emails that allegedly exist that have become public between Epstein and Gates. One is Gates talking to his colleagues back in 2011 and him saying, his lifestyle is very different and kind of intriguing, although it would not work for me. And then another one where he says that a very attractive Swedish woman and her daughter dropped by and I ended up staying there quite late. I wonder why he was doing that. He was still married to Melinda Gates at the time. Why would he stay so late? Anyway, not here for me to speculate. That's for you guys to do. But then in 2017, the big bomb one was that Epstein sent an email to Gates requesting for this Russian bridge player, Mila Antonova, that Epstein knew that Bill Gates needed to pay her coding school tuition and reimburse him for that. And that if he didn't pay for Antonova's coding school tuition, that Epstein might expose him in some way, which some people took to mean that Bill Gates had a relationship in some degree or another with Antonova. And so Epstein might have been writing this email to say, you better pay up, buddy, or I'm gonna out you. Now, to be fair, Bill Gates did admit that he met with Epstein many times and had several dinners with him in the hope of getting billions for his philanthropy causes specific to do with global health, because if you don't know, Bill Gates is also really into pandemic prevention and health issues and biohazards, warfare, all this stuff. What do I mean by that? I guess this is similar to what Fauci was doing when he was involved with gain of function research. What is that? Well, if you guys don't know, the U.S. dropped a final minority report on the origins of COVID-19 global pandemic, including the roles of CCP, back around 2021 in the summer. And they did this to try to understand what happened with COVID. Anyway, I didn't want to go down this rabbit hole either, but basically this government report said that there was a lab in China that was in Wuhan that was working on gain-of-function research. And actually, the lab had been initially funded by the U.S. several years before, and then they started to worry that the lab was not protecting the research they were doing there properly. This is what is in the U.S. final minority report. And so the U.S. government had pulled out and not backed this lab anymore. The lab continued to function anyway, even though the U.S. wasn't funding it. And they were working on gain of function research. And they believe that this is where the breach occurred that caused COVID-19. Well, I, of course, reading this report was like, what the hell is gain of function research? Well, gain of function research is a euphemism for biological research aimed at increasing the virulence and lethality, did you hear that, of pathogens and viruses. One use is to bridge animal diseases to human beings and other primates. Biological warfare is one prime application for this research. The Chinese were prohibited from conducting this research by treaty and by agreement with the USA as a condition for their funding. But it appears that they were doing gain of function research when this breach occurs. Now, tying it back to Bill Gates, he would be doing things that would try to prevent outbreaks from gain of function, hopefully. One of the reasons that countries do this type of research is not to just wipe out mankind, although I guess the wrong guy in a position of power there could make that decision. The reason they do it is to try to come up with antibodies to try to fight pandemics that may be spawned through biological warfare. So the government is working on trying to anticipate biological warfare that can impact us and then create a way to fight it in advance. So that's what this is supposed to be. Well, anyway, this lab, it went terribly wrong, like out of a movie, Frankenstein. Anyway, if you want to read that report from 2021 because you're a fan of this type of thing, then please go in the Patreon and search U.S. Final Minority Report on the Origins of COVID-19 Global Pandemic, including the roles of CCP, and you will find it in the Patreon. You can download the PDF and have fun learning all about gain-of-function research. Now, Bill Gates said, I am so horrified at what this man did, but, there is a sense in Virginia's books that Epstein has a bunch of friends that are very, very powerful billionaires. There's not that many billionaires out there, guys. If you're trying to look at a circle of billionaires, there's 30, 40 billionaires? I don't know. I'll look up the number. But, it's only a few people that are in the B category. So Bill Gates, just to say it, it's not like he's squeaky clean. I don't know if you guys know about Bill Gates, but he had to resign from the board of Microsoft because he had an extramarital affair on his wife with a Microsoft employee. He also, when this all broke publicly, it came out that he may have had other extramarital affairs and inappropriate relationships with employees and subordinates at Microsoft. There's also been books written that Bill Gates used to go to Seattle all-nude strip clubs and invite strippers to come back and hang out at his pool. This was from a biography that James Wallace wrote. And it's alleged that this didn't just happen once, it happened a few times. Here's a quote that was in the UK Daily Mail that covered this biography. A lot of those Microsoft kids back then, they were young guys in pizza-stained T-shirts for 2 or 3 days working on software code. Then they would have some pretty wild parties where they would go and get strippers in Seattle and bring them over to Bill's home. There were even rumors that he used to frequent Boston's notorious Combat Zone with its porn shows, strip joints, and prostitutes when he was at Harvard. Wallace even alleged that Bill Gates was known for being a womanizer, but the way they were able to protect that image for him was to spoon feed stories to industry writers for the New York Times and others that, would keep them busy with that flow of information and not focusing on this more scandalous stuff. Also, of course, the time period was very different in the way that people wanted to find the truth. They wanted, a truth that was a pretty truth, not the real truth. Anyway, you have to believe James Wallace to believe all the wild stripper stories, but the rumor is that Bill Gates loves strippers. What can I tell you? Okay, so I'm not saying he would have liked young underage girls by any means, but he certainly liked women. Oh, I almost forgot. Remember the ex-girlfriend, Anne Windblad? That came out too, that Bill Gates had an arrangement approved by Melinda. He could spend a weekend in Windblad having beach trysts where he would go dune buggying with her and hand gliding and walking on the beach, all with his ex-girlfriend, Anne Windblad. And Melinda was okay with this. Now, I don't know if he said to Melinda, hey, listen, this is my old friend, and although I love you and I'm married to you, I don't want to lose my tradition of this one weekend a year thing that I do with my ex-girlfriend. We're just strictly friends. And Melinda was like, cool, I get it. I trust you totally. Or if it was something weirder and he was like, listen, I'm a billionaire and I'll marry you, but I have a few requirements. And one of them is that you let me sleep with my ex-girlfriend for a weekend a year because I really like her still. But I don't want to marry her. I want to marry you. I don't know. I don't know what this was, and I don't think anyone does. Only he does. What do I always tell you guys? The richer they are, the smarter they are, the weirder they are, and the harder to deal with they are. I guarantee the weird idiosyncrasies that Melinda Gates had to deal with while being married to Bill Gates had to have been soul-crushing shit. I'm grateful that she got out of it with billions. And I know we spent a lot of time away from home, and she probably wasn't missing him while he was gone. Let's put it that way. But they have kids together, and so there's that. So Melinda Gates files for divorce shortly after it's made public that Bill Gates had these interactions with Epstein. I think it was the final straw for her. And that's it. And she went on her merry way. And I think she's probably happier for it. Why Boris? Boris was the one who did the introduction between Epstein and Bill Gates. He was the one coordinating between the two men communication. Also, when, Bill Gates was doing favors for Epstein, Boris was the middleman. And when Epstein was potentially going to do philanthropic work for Bill Gates, Boris was involved with that as well. So my guess is that Boris probably has the communication that everybody's missing between Bill Gates and Epstein, and that's why he wanted to call him out. But of course, this show is about you guys figuring it out, not me figuring it out. So now you guys get to ponder why Boris Nikolic was listed on Epstein's will as the executor, even though he had zero friendship with Epstein. You guys get to have fun with that mystery. And now, without further ado, I'm going to bring in the final part of the Maria Farmer Lost episode. Let's take it away.
Come on, bitch, let's go.
Where we left off, Maria Farmer was talking about being kidnapped by Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell to Les Wexner's house, where he was residing with his wife in a separate estate, like right over, the way. She was like in the guest house. And the reason that Maria Farmer feels like she's been kidnapped is she can't come and go as she chooses. And there's allegedly killer dogs on the property and sharpshooters, security men everywhere. And so every move she makes has to be requested. She has to say, like, can I go to the mailbox and get the mail? And then, I don't know, they put the killer dogs away and the snipers don't take her out as an intruder. And then she can walk to the mailbox. So things like that. Now, one more reminder. After the end of the interview last week, Maria Farmer feels like, based on some really strange things, that Les Wexner might have ties to the CIA. And so could Abigail, his wife, who's also there, and potentially Epstein and Ghislaine. And she feels this way because of some anomalies, like I discussed earlier in the show, with the Ghislaine Nick overlap with this odd super attorney, as well as some of the people that work for Epstein getting the book thrown at them, but then others don't. And of course, what I said at the beginning of this episode that Acosta said, that Epstein was intelligence. So all of this has led her to associate this kidnapping with the CIA versus Epstein, Les Wexner, Ghislaine, and Abigail.
Being kidnapped like that by your own government, acceptable. I think that right now we're pursuing. Well, we've just ordered an investigation.
So NT asks where Epstein and Ghislaine stayed when they came to Les Wexner, because they visit Maria Farmer a few times.
So they stayed in the guest house. Again, it's 26,000 square feet, right? It's enormous. There was a section of the guest house I was never allowed in, and it was the section where Jeffrey's room was. And it was weird because when I went in there, it looked just like all the other, it was a Georgian manor house. And so it's laid out with like the four corners. And I was allowed in three corners, but not in the fourth one. It was identical to everything else. But for whatever reason, I don't know what they kept in there. Now, the whole thing was, I was being videotaped that whole summer by pinhole cameras too. But that one section of the house they stayed in, and it wasn't until their last visit that I was invited in there, and I got a really weird feeling, 2 days at the most. Yeah. So usually it was just for work. So like when they would come, I was really excited because I was allowed to go out. And one time this girl that was visiting that I wasn't so fond of that they allowed me to have as a friend, she and I were allowed to go to Wexner's Mall and, like Bath and Body Works and all that garbage. Anyway, it was exciting to get out of the house. And then one time they visited and we all went to the movies with my brothers. They were very immature. Mm-hmm. So this is the other thing I have to back up and say. I had a very dear friend that I admire very much. His name is John Paulson, and I call him JP. John Paulson is a billionaire, and he worked in finance like Epstein claimed to. And I worked with JP just like as a side job, just cash side job. And I would bring his food and all that stuff, or find things for him at Sotheby's for his house, bidding. And he worked nonstop at his desk, right? As a finance guy. Like he never stopped working. He was always on Wall Street working. And so I'm so confused when then I go to work for Epstein and he claims he's the financial manager for Leslie Wexner, who's a billionaire. But he's never working. He's getting massages. He's napping. He's making plans for dinner parties. I never saw the guy work. Never.
So then there's a few moments that were really triggering for the people who listened to last week's show if I had left them in. One was that NT knew all about everything to do with Epstein and in particular Maria Farmer's situation. He was like all knowing. And of course, if you listened to the beginning of last week's show, you know that Cassandra had written notes for NT and he was like trying to pull it together on the fly during the interview. He had no idea of Maria Farmer's story outside of Cassandra's notes that he was using. And of course, then he also says, isn't it awful that Paulson got a divorce and married a much, much younger woman? And they have a whole conversation about how Paulson had a midlife crisis and went for this young girl that he was dating instead of his wife, who was loyal and good, and he built his world with as a billionaire and had kids with. And I'm dying the whole time because Enty has Cassandra, his mistress, that doesn't know he's married, recording the show for him, this particular interview, and he's criticizing Paulson for losing his mind, and Cassandra is much younger than Enty, much, much younger. So I'm thinking to myself, how weird is it to listen to this guy criticize Paulson and he's doing simultaneously the same thing?
I'm kind of disgusted. I'm so disappointed in JP because he fell for the typical midlife crisis man thing instead of.
She's like a nutritionist or something like that. And she was 30 years old or something like that.
12. Yeah, she's gross. Yeah. I admire his wife. That's all I can say. I think she's beautiful. But they had beautiful kids, beautiful girls. But all I wanted to say is that JP worked his butt off to make his money.
That was the point.
Epstein never worked. When I first walked into Epstein's office the first time was for the first meeting I had. I walked in and sitting behind him on the radiator, like a little blow-up doll, was Morgan Fairchild. Yeah, sitting there like a little blow-up doll. She was there all the time. She was ubiquitous. He admired her, I guess, as a teenager or something. And so he always considered her to be the perfect woman, he said. And so he liked to have this creepy entourage of people that he thought were, important. She's a creep. I would love to have a word with her.
Really? Because here's the thing is I've asked her to be on this podcast before, but I didn't know the thing about the Epstein.
Oh my God. Yeah. Please ask her to be on. Tell her Maria Farmer would love to see her on a radiator again. I'd love to have a chat. So she doesn't know who I am, but I guarantee you she watched a lot of us, a lot of victims, and she never said a word. Having a female private part as an excuse to be weak, I do not respect you. I think women are stronger. That's why we have babies, right? So please speak up, ladies. If you see something like this, don't be a Cindy McCain. Don't be a Morgan Fairchild. We should make these expressions. Don't be a Morgan Fairchild, People should teach their kids.
So Maria brings this up, and yes, it was in Vanity Fair that Epstein was obsessed with Morgan Fairchild, that he had a photo of her in his home in the Upper East Side. He was always telling people that was his ideal look or woman, and he was hanging around with Morgan Fairchild, allegedly, and Ava Anderson, who was a former model and Miss Sweden. And allegedly, Morgan Fairchild said in an ex that she was a friend of Jeffrey Epstein. But now with everything that came out, he was dead to her.
She wrote something about it. She goes...
Yeah, much later.
Not until 2019 or whatever.
Uh-huh.
She said, I was a friend of his.
Because I brought her
became
up.
Dead to me. Yeah. Oh, is that why?
Yes.
Well,
it was after I brought her up.
So do you think that they were having sex?
I don't know that Epstein had sex with anyone that I know of.
Yeah,
well, I do know of one girl he raped. She was a child.
Yes. I remember that was a Florida girl, right?
Beautiful. Gosh, she's so beautiful. Yes. She had her interview on. She just doesn't really want to be part of,
Yeah.
She's kind of done with it. And she had such trauma that I can't even imagine. But yeah, I do know he raped her.
Then she's asked, do you think that Epstein had sex with Ghislaine? And this is what she says.
Yeah, no, I doubt it. They had a lot of devices. She had a sex swing in the Florida home, all this weird stuff in there. And she was like, she had these straps and she would hang upside down. She's like, look, I'm like a vampire. I can hang upside down all day. She was really into like staying young and doing all this stuff. But they had a lot of sexual devices, contraptions, and and in this room. And I've heard from all the women that they had trauma because of those things. I haven't heard from anyone that had trauma because he slept with them. Ken makes me think he's gay.
So then Enty brings up Emmy Taylor, Ghislaine's assistant. Now, you need to know that Emmy was brought up in Virginia's book I mentioned earlier on the show. Virginia described Emmy as key to the Epstein-Ghislaine operation. She was described as someone who helped train her and other young women in massage techniques and also other services expected by Jeffrey and his quote-unquote associates. Also recruited, looked for women that would be able to be trained and recruited into the organization. Also managed the logistics of Jeffrey's activities and coordinated his schedule. And she also was the one who put him with young women. Like if he wanted an appointment with someone, she would be the one to put that together for Jeffrey at one of his properties. She knew the right people to put with people, and she would organize like matchups. And this is all per Virginia's book. Anyway, Virginia doesn't really present Emmy as a victim of Epstein, more of an operation manager.
Oh God, please. She's such a, yeah.
Do you
I don't have anything
that
to
she and
dispute about her.
Ghislaine would sleep together? Was Ghislaine sleeping with women or men? Do you know?
I think mostly women from the way she touched me. That's just what I think.
Okay.
But I don't know. I think maybe she was just bi. I think these people would sleep with anyone for money at any time. That's the way I feel. I don't know. So I don't know if they even had a specific gender they preferred, but she made me feel like she was really into me, which weirded me out. I had a boyfriend, Jeff, back in New York. Didn't want to cheat on him. It was all very traumatic. I got it when she was touching me, for sure. She also seems kind of masculine. Like she was very athletic. I don't know if that's a masculine trait, but I always think of it as one. And she was very athletic, but like not very, at the time, she would starve herself. She'd eat like an apple. So she didn't have any curves, So maybe that was just part of an eating disorder. But she was also really into like building her muscles with rollerblades. But I don't know. I don't know what their proclivities were. I just know that he felt gay and she did too, like to me. And so that's how I always told it, like, and in our family, that's what we always assumed. Right.
Well, yeah.
And my mom and I we kind of thought Epstein was gay and he was just married to Ghislaine to be nice to her. This was at the very beginning when we talked about it. And most of my guy friends are gay. And I asked them and they were like, no, guys aren't that nice. He's not going to marry her just to make her feel better. Like he's not gay if he married her. And I don't know, but they weren't married. Right. So it was all a charade.
It was a charade, but she was always involved in the massaging of the, like, not
girls.
just with the girls, right? She would massage the girls and stuff. And
that's what they had them all do. So like Shelley Lewis, all the women that, the Jennifer Kalins, the Sarah Kellans, they all say they were girlfriends and massage therapists. Really?
Right.
Yeah, right. Yeah, there are a lot of code words in this case. Girlfriend means recruiter.
Yes, exactly. Now, you say when you got to the house, when you first, moved there to the guest house, that Abigail called to welcome you.
Yes,
right?
yes.
But the
Certainly
entrance, it was two separate, like the property to get to the guest house, you used a different driveway than you did to get to the main house. Is that how it went?
Okay, so basically, there's the entrance at White Barn Road, and there are these little barns, these literal white barns, and you go in through the white fencing. You drive past the main house, and it'll be on your left. At the time, they were building the stables, which was like on the right, and then you wind around, and on the left again is the guest house. So the guest house sits right behind the main house, and I actually did some drawings from the guest house to the main house, and it's really not that much of a distance. You can see it now. It looks like a greater distance because all the trees have grown, right? But at the time, those trees weren't even grown; they were little shrubs. And so, that New Albany, you were talking about the designer. Did you say his name was Kessler? No, not Kessler.
No, I was talking about the guy who helped build it.
Designed the homes.
Yeah, and
they're horrible. Yeah, they're like bad Georgian. It's like Disney World.
Well, Steve Tuckerman is the guy that built
Tuckerman. He's not talented. Yeah, I just want to make sure people don't hire him. That was garbage. I'm like, what is this, Epcot? Like, it was very disappointing. But it everything looked like it might be real, but nothing was. In this whole situation.
I know one time you said that when you're at the house, and I understand, you had to get permission to walk the dog and all that kind of stuff, but you just went to like lay out in the backyard and they wanted you to go back inside. Did they say why?
I had to go in.
But did they say why?
No. It's just so like, here I am, nobody, an artist that no one's heard of, living in the middle of nowhere, Ohio, and I wasn't allowed outside. They did say that if you go out, you will be shot by sharpshooters or eaten by the dogs or killed by the dogs, mauled, whatever. But they said either the dogs or the sharpshooters will get you. So you have to always call to ask permission. I was usually not granted permission. And I didn't. And when I asked Epstein, he was like, oh, they're just very paranoid.
For the full scoop, join the Dishing Drama Dana Patreon. The link is in this audio description. It's only $6 a month, and you'll get the best information and tea about the things you care about. And even the things you don't know you care about. What are you waiting for?